May 29, 1943. RAF Allenbury, England. 11:47 a.m. The English light filtered gray through broken clouds, casting long shadows beneath the bomber's wings. Captain James Hartwell stood on the concrete hard stand, with his hand resting on the polished aluminum skin of aircraft 42-5738, and he already knew something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the oleo struts compressed more than they should, in the sag of the tires, in the subtle, sinking posture of a machine burdened beyond its design. 26 years old, 42 combat missions, 0 experience in what he was about to fly. The ground crew worked fast. Hartwell watched Staff Sergeant Raymond Morrison, no relation to his flight engineer, different man entirely, feed the last belt of 50 caliber ammunition into the modified bomber's 17th gun position. The brass links clinked as they slid into the feed tray. Morrison's hands moved with the efficiency of repetition, but his eyes kept drifting to the fuselage. Everyone on this base had walked around the YB-40 by now. Everyone had counted the gun barrels protruding from every angle of the airframe. Everyone had done the math on what 16 machine guns meant for firepower, and what 4,000 extra pounds meant for performance. Hartwell climbed the ladder into the cockpit. The seat felt the same. The yoke felt different, heavier in his hands before he even touched it. His crew was already aboard. Technical Sergeant Paul Morrison in the top turret, Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney in the waist, Staff Sergeant Raymond Cack in the tail. 24,000 rounds of ammunition distributed throughout the fuselage. Additional armor plating welded over every crew station. A bombardier station converted into a chin turret. No bombs. That was the part that kept catching Hartwell's attention. No bombs. They weren't going to kill submarines today. They weren't going to destroy concrete pens or sink ships or disrupt German logistics. They were going to fly into France, shoot at anything that attacked the formation, and then somehow fly home. The weight made everything wrong. Hartwell knew this aircraft. He'd flown B-17 since 1941. He knew how they climbed, how they turned, how they settled into formation. He knew the vibration of 4 R-1820 Cyclones at cruise power. He knew the resistance in the yoke during a max performance climb. This aircraft didn't feel like any of that. Colonel Reed had been honest in the briefing. 7 YB-40s. 7 hand-selected crews. First combat test of a concept that seemed obvious on paper. If fighters couldn't escort bombers all the way to Germany and back, turn a bomber into a fighter. Give it so many guns that no German pilot would dare close to firing range. The concept had a name, the Flying Destroyer. The crews had a different name for 42-5738. They called it Hedgehog. Hartwell checked the clock. 1022 p.m. 3 minutes to engine start. He watched the ground crew pull the chocks, clear the area, give him the thumbs up. Morrison was already moving through the pre-start checklist from the top turret, his voice calm in the intercom. The fuel gauges showed full tanks. The ammunition counters showed 11,275 rounds. The weight board showed 68,000 pounds at takeoff. A standard B-17F with bombs weighed 65,000. Without bombs, that same aircraft weighed 48,000. Hedgehog would never drop its payload. Every pound of ammunition, every belt of 50 caliber, every turret and twin mount and feed mechanism would stay with them until they landed, if they landed. Hartwell pressed the starter for number 1 engine. The propeller turned. The Cyclone coughed, caught, smoothed into its familiar rumble. Number 2, number 3, number 4. All 4 engines running. All 4 oil pressures in the green. All 4 cylinder head temperatures climbing normally. The control tower cleared them for takeoff at 1030. Hedgehog rolled toward the runway with 168 other bombers following. 1042 p.m. Runway 23. Hedgehog lifted off at 105 knots. Hartwell felt it immediately. The reluctance. Standard B-17s broke ground clean, almost eager. Hedgehog rose like it was pulling against chains. The yoke vibrated with strain that had nothing to do with engine performance and everything to do with aerodynamics. 4,000 extra pounds distributed everywhere except where it should be. The gear came up. Morrison called it from the top turret. Gear doors closed. No hydraulic leaks. Hartwell banked east-southeast, settling into the assembly orbit. Below, the English countryside rolled green and patchwork, hedgerows dividing fields like sutures. He could see the other YB-40s in the circuit, 42, 47, 41 flown by Captain Hayes, 42, 47, 32, 42, 5744, three more he couldn't identify from this angle. All of them laboring. All of them struggling to reach altitude before the main formation formed up. The climb burned fuel at a rate Hartwell had never seen. Morrison dropped down from the top turret and leaned between the pilot seats. 31 years old, 200 hours maintaining B-17s before the conversion. He knew these engines the way a surgeon knows arteries. His eyes moved across the instrument panel and his expression shifted, not alarm, but recognition. "We're burning 800 pounds per hour per engine," Morrison said. Brief said 650. Hartwell didn't look away from the horizon. "How much reserve?" "None. We're eating the reserve right now." Standard B-17Fs climbed to 20,000 feet in 25 minutes. Hedgehog needed 48. The formation couldn't wait. The formation never waited. Bombers assembled at altitude, consolidated into combat boxes, and crossed the channel on schedule. If you weren't at altitude when the formation departed, you flew alone. Hartwell pushed the throttles forward. Number 3, engine whined, protested, settled into a higher pitch. The airspeed indicator crept upward. 122, 124, 126. Not enough. Never enough. Behind him, the crew settled into their positions. Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney in the waist, checking the twin 50s on both sides. Staff Sergeant Raymond Cack in the tail, adjusting his gun sight, tracking contrails that hadn't appeared yet. The chin turret gunner, Lieutenant Bradley, 23 years old, former P-39 pilot grounded by an ear infection, swiveled his turret through full traverse, testing the hydraulics. 16 guns. 11,000 rounds. A flying fortress that had traded its teeth for claws. At 3:10 p.m., Hedgehog reached 18,000 feet. The main formation was already assembling at 21,000, half a mile above them. Hartwell could see the combat boxes forming. Lead Squadron, High Squadron, Low Squadron. B-17 sliding into position like pieces of a machine. He should have been in the Low Squadron. That was his assignment. That was where Hedgehog was supposed to be. Instead, he was still climbing. "Push it," Hartwell said. Morrison looked at number 3's cylinder head temperature. It was already in the yellow. "Captain, push it." Number 3 climbed into the red. The needle touched the limit line, held, trembled. Morrison watched it like he was watching a man bleed out. The engine didn't fail. It didn't seize. It just ran hotter than it was designed to run, burning fuel that should have been saved for the return leg, consuming itself to buy altitude. At 3,022, Hedgehog reached 20,000 feet. The formation was still above them, still pulling away. Hartwell adjusted trim. The yoke fought back. The center of gravity sat wrong. Every test pilot who'd flown this configuration said the same thing. All that ammunition behind the bomb bay, all that weight distributed according to necessity rather than physics. Hedgehog flew nose high, drag heavy, wrong. The radio crackled. Hayes's voice, "Hedgehog, this is 5741. We're at 2,100 feet low. Colonel says take position in the trail element." Trail element, the most vulnerable spot in the formation. The position German fighters loved to hunt, because bombers at the back had less supporting fire, fewer overlapping fields, more sky between them and the rest of the group. Exactly where they wanted the YB-40. Hartwell acknowledged and slid into position. Below and behind the main formation, slightly right of the bomber stream. The English coast appeared through broken clouds, cliffs, then water, then nothing. They were leaving England behind. Morrison checked the fuel again. 43 minutes to target. The gauges were already lower than they should be. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "we're going to have problems on the way back." Hartwell didn't answer. He was watching the horizon. 30,031 p.m., French coast. Guernsey passing below at 19,800 feet. Flak burst off the right wing. Not close, not accurate, just enough to remind everyone that Germany knew they were coming. Hartwell watched the black flowers bloom in the gray sky, each one a petal of shrapnel reaching for aluminum. The formation held steady. Bombardiers checked their intervals. Gunners rotated turrets through their arcs. Hedgehog's weight pulled at the yoke constantly. Hartwell had both hands on the wheel now, fighting the trim, fighting the drag, fighting the fundamental wrongness of an aircraft that didn't want to fly formation at 14.8 knots. The other B-17s cruised at 170. Every few seconds, Hartwell's eyes dropped to the airspeed indicator. 14.8, 14.7, 14.9, never enough, Never the speed he needed. He pushed the throttles forward. Number 3's cylinder head temperature climbed. Morrison said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The radio crackled with fragmentary transmissions, gunners reporting contrails, navigators confirming fixes, pilots discussing weather ahead. Then, at 3038, a voice Hartwell didn't recognize. Bandits at 12 o'clock high. Multiple. Looks like Focke-Wulfs. Hartwell's throat tightened. This was the moment. This was why they were here. All gunners, he said into the intercom. Track your sectors. Weapons tight until they commit. The chin turret swiveled forward. Lieutenant Bradley's voice came back calm. Tracking 12 o'clock. 3 aircraft, maybe 4. Range, estimating 1,500. The Focke-Wulf 90s dove at the formation from 12 o'clock high. The blind spot that had killed more B-17 crews than any other attack vector. Standard bombers had 2 cheek guns in the nose, mounted on either side of the bombardier station. Limited traverse. Limited elevation. German pilots had learned they could fly straight at the formation, fire through the gap between those 2 guns, and escape before the top turret could track them. Hedgehog didn't have a gap. The lead FW-19D closed to 1,000 yards. Bradley waited. 800. 700. The German pilot held his course, confident, comfortable, flying straight into a trap he didn't know existed. 600 yards. Bradley fired. The chin turret's twin 50s erupted. Tracers streamed forward in a converging cone, walking across the FW-190's nose, stitching across the engine cowling, chewing through the magnesium alloy skin. The German pilot's canopy shattered. His aircraft rolled right, smoke pouring from the cowl flaps, and dropped through the formation in a vertical dive. Delaney's voice from the waist. He's not pulling out. He's not there. He's going in. The FW-190 disappeared into the undercast. 1 second it was there, trailing black smoke. The next second it was gone. Bradley's voice, reloading. The chin turret's feed mechanism cycled. Fresh belts of 50 caliber slid into the breeches. Morrison watched from the top turret and said nothing, but Hartwell could feel his crew's morale shift in the intercom silence. They'd killed a German fighter. They'd done what they were designed to do. The second wave attacked from 11 o'clock low. Standard B-17s struggled with this vector 2-ball turrets tracked well below the horizon, but the transition from low to level approach created a dead zone. Hedgehog's twin waist guns answered. Delaney fired a 4-second burst from the port position, tracking the diving fighter, walking tracers across its wing route. The FW-190 broke left, jinked, dove away. He's not coming back, Delaney said. For 6 minutes, Hedgehog's firepower worked exactly as designed. German fighters approached from 12 vectors. German fighters broke off early. The overlapping fields of fire from 16 guns created something no Luftwaffe pilot wanted to penetrate, not because it was invulnerable, but because the math was wrong. Closing to firing range meant flying through streams of 50 caliber from multiple directions. Even if you killed the bomber, you died in the same second. The formation pressed deeper into France. Morrison checked the fuel gauges. Checked them again. Did the math in his head. Recalculated. Did the math again. Captain, he said, we've burned 900 gallons more than briefed. Hartwell looked at the airspeed indicator. 147. The main formation was pulling away. 3,004 TPM, over Normandy. 19,200 feet. The gap was measurable now. Hartwell could see it in the diminishing size of the B-17s ahead, the way they shrank against the gray sky, the way their contrails stretched thinner as distance increased. 3 miles, maybe 4. The other YB-40s in the formation were suffering the same fate. He could see 42-5741 laboring 1,000 yards off his right wing, Hayes fighting the same battle with the same impossible weight. The German fighters saw it too. They didn't press attacks anymore. They circled at a distance, 2,000 yards out, sometimes 3 watching, waiting, studying. The FW-190s had learned in 6 minutes what the YB-40 was. Now they were figuring out what it wasn't. It wasn't fast. Hartwell pushed the throttles forward. Number 3. Engine cylinder head temperature climbed through the red line. Morrison watched the needle touch 260 degrees Celsius. Hold, tremble. He didn't call it out. He didn't need to. Hartwell knew what he was doing to the engine. Captain, Morrison said, we lose number 3. We lose this fight. Hartwell held the throttles. The airspeed indicator crept up. 148, 49, 50. The gap stopped growing. It didn't shrink. At 3058, the bomb group reached the initial point. St. Nazaire appeared through broken clouds, submarine pens, dock facilities, the curve of the Loire estuary. Hartwell watched the lead squadron's bomb bay doors open, a synchronized mechanical bloom of aluminum and hydraulics. Bombs tumbled out. The formation lightened by 4 tons per aircraft, climbing faster immediately, accelerating immediately. Hedgehog carried nothing to drop. The B-17s ahead pulled away like racehorses unburdened. Hartwell watched them climb, 20,000, 2,100, 22. Their contrails stretched thinner, higher, farther. The gap widened from 4 miles to 5, 5 to 6. Morrison's voice was flat. We've lost them. Hayes radioed from 42-54-1. Hedgehog, I'm showing the main formation at 7 miles and increasing. You seeing the same? Hartwell keyed the mic. Affirmative. Recommend we hold altitude and maintain course. They'll send recovery escort for the stragglers. Stragglers. That's what they were now. Not escorts, not protectors. Stragglers. The German fighters had watched the bomb drop too. They'd watched the formation accelerate, watched the YB-40s fall behind, watched the gap become a chasm. And now they understood. 3 FW-190s appeared at 4 o'clock high, not attacking, circling. 2 more at 10 o'clock level. 1 at 6 o'clock low, just visible against the gray channel water far below. 6 fighters, maybe more, circling at a distance, waiting. Delaney's voice from the waist, they're not coming in. No, Hartwell said, they're not, because they didn't need to. The YB-40 was already dying, not from bullets, not from cannon fire, but from physics. 4,000 extra pounds. Engines running redline. Fuel burning at rates that would leave them swimming in the channel before they ever saw England. The German pilots only had to wait. Captain, Morrison said, we need to pull number 3 back. If we lose it now, we're swimming. Hartwell looked at the temperature gauge, looked at the fighters circling in the distance, looked at the fuel totalizer counting down in gallons he couldn't replace. He pulled the throttle back. Number 3 cylinder head temperature began to descend, slowly, reluctantly, like a fever breaking. The airspeed indicator followed. 107, 107, 145, 142. The gap widened to 8 miles. Hartwell's hands gripped the yoke so hard his knuckles whitened. 26 years old, 42 combat missions. 0 experience in what it felt like to become the target you were supposed to protect. But he was learning. 4,023 p.m., 18,700 feet, somewhere between St. Nazaire and the Channel coast. The contrails were gone. Hedgehog had descended below the altitude where water vapor froze, trading altitude for engine preservation, trading speed for the hope of reaching England. The sky felt empty now. No formation ahead, no friendly contrails, nothing but gray overcast and gray water and the distant specks of German fighters that refused to leave. 6. Hartwell had counted 6 distinct aircraft in the last 30 minutes. They rotated positions like wolves circling a wounded elk. Sometimes they disappeared behind clouds. Sometimes they reappeared closer. Always they watched. Morrison had stopped calling out the fuel state. There was no point. Everyone on the intercom knew the numbers. Everyone had done the math. At current power settings, they had 62 minutes of fuel remaining. The English coast was 53 minutes away at their current ground speed. 9 minutes of reserve, maybe 10, if the headwinds didn't shift, if they didn't have to maneuver, if the fighters didn't force them to push throttles forward and burn what little remained. The intercom was quiet, not the silence of calm, the silence of men listening to engines, watching gauges, waiting. Staff Sergeant Cack broke it from the tail position. Bandits at 6 o'clock high. 2 aircraft, range 1,000 and closing. Hartwell's hands found the throttles. Type, Messerschmitts, 1009s. Different fighters now. The FW-190s had done their reconnaissance. They'd identified the stragglers, assessed the threat, radioed back to bases near Rennes. Now the hunters were sending fresh wolves. Gunners, Hartwell said, track your sectors. They're going to test us. The first 109 dub at 6 o'clock, the classic stern attack, the one the tail gunner existed to counter. Cock opened fire at 800 yards. His tracers arced toward the diving fighter, a stream of orange light against gray sky. The German pilot jinked left, right, dove 20 degrees. His wingman followed. They didn't break off. Cannon shells punched through Hedgehog's tail section at 400 yards. Hartwell felt the impact through the yoke, not a vibration, a shudder. Something structural, something wrong. Cack's voice. Hit in the tail. Horizontal stabilizer. I'm checking. Elevator cables intact, but trim tabs jammed. She's gonna fight you, Captain. The yoke had already told him. Hedgehog wanted to climb. No, not climb, wanted to pitch up. The jammed trim tab had locked the elevator in a slightly nose-high position. Hartwell pushed forward against the resistance, found the new neutral, held it there with constant pressure. The Messerschmitts climbed away for another pass. Morrison was already climbing down from the top turret, moving aft to assess damage. Hartwell heard his boots on the catwalk, then his voice over intercom. Horizontal stabilizers chewed up. No major structural failure, but that trim tab is welded in place by whatever hit it. You're going to be fighting this all the way home. Can you free it manually? Negative. Not without going outside the aircraft. Outside, at 18,000 feet, in sub-zero temperatures, with German fighters circling. Forget it, Hartwell said. Stay inside. Morrison didn't argue. He climbed back to the top turret and resumed scanning the sky. The second pass came from 10 o'clock level. Bradley tracked it with the chin turret, fired, missed. The 109's cannon shells walked across Hedgehog's right wing, one hydraulic line severed. Delaney called it from the waist, fluid spraying across the window. Right gear hydraulic systems gone. Manual gear extension. If they made it back, they'd have to crank the landing gear down by hand. Morrison added it to the mental list of failures accumulating on this aircraft. But the 109 broke off. The combined fire from chin and top turrets had been enough. Not a kill, not even visible damage, but enough. The German pilot decided this bomber wasn't worth the risk. His wingman didn't. The third 109 pressed through at 11 o'clock low, firing a 3-second burst. 20mm shells ripped through Hedgehog's radio room, shredded the armor plate behind Delaney's position, exited through the left waist window without detonating. Delaney shouted, "Not pain, surprise!" and dropped below the window frame. Hartwell's voice cracked. "Delaney!" Status. I'm fine. Armor caught most of it. They're through the fuselage, but I'm okay." Delaney's voice shook. His hands would be shaking too. But he was alive, and he was already back on his guns. The Messerschmitts climbed away. The circling FW-190s had moved closer during the attack. 600 yards now. Watching. Waiting. Hayes's voice crackled over the radio. "Hedgehog, this is 5741. We're at your 7 o'clock, descending to your altitude. Suggest we form up together." Hartwell looked left. There, Hayes's YB-40, dropping through 18,000, struggling on 3 good engines, and one that had started running rough 20 minutes ago. Another gunship. Another straggler. Another aircraft that had fallen behind and couldn't catch up. 2 YB-40s. 32 guns. The same impossible weight. The same fuel gauges ticking toward empty. "Agreed," Hartwell said. "Form on my right. Overlapping fields." Hayes acknowledged. His bomber slid into position 200 yards off Hedgehog's right wing. 2 flying destroyers, side by side, alone over occupied France with German fighters circling and the English coast still 47 minutes away. The wolves didn't leave. They just circled wider. 5,007 p.m. French coast, outbound, 17,200 feet. The coastline passed beneath Hedgehog's nose cliffs, then beach, then water. Hartwell watched France recede through the plexiglass and felt no relief. The channel stretched gray and empty ahead. 33 miles to England at their current position. 33 miles of open water. 33 miles with nowhere to hide. Morrison called out the fuel, 51 minutes remaining at current power setting. The English coast was 32 minutes away at their ground speed. 19 minutes of reserve. Better than before. Not good enough. Hayes's YB-40 labored off the right wing. His number 2 engine was running rougher now. Morrison could hear the misfire even through his headset, an uneven cadence that meant cylinder problems, oil starvation, the slow death of an engine pushed beyond its design limits. Hayes had throttled it back to prevent seizure. His airspeed had dropped to 138. Hedgehog slowed to match. The German fighters followed them over water. 6 aircraft, maybe 7, Hartwell had lost count. FW-190s and Me-109s intermixed, taking turns orbiting the 2 bombers at 800 yards. They didn't attack. They didn't need to attack. Every minute they circled, the YB-40s burned fuel. Every minute they waited, the English coast came closer, but the reserve margin shrank. "Captain," Morrison said, "if they follow us all the way to England, we land with dry tanks." Hartwell knew. There was nothing he could do about it. The intercom stayed quiet. Gunners tracked their sectors. Delaney had rigged a temporary patch over the shell hole in the fuselage, not structural, just wind blocking, enough to reduce the freezing draft that had been pouring through the waist since the attack. Cox sat in the tail with his damaged horizontal stabilizer and his jam-trimmed tab in his guns, watching the fighters circle behind them. At 5009, the Messerschmitts attacked. Two of them, 6 o'clock high, diving through the overcast at 400 knots. Cox called them out at 1,000 yards. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who had accepted that this was where he would die and decided to make it expensive. Tracking targets. Range 800. Both aircraft inbound. Hayes's tail gunner opened fire first. His tracers converged on the lead 109, forced the pilot to jink left. Cac fired 2 seconds later, walking his rounds across the second fighter's nose. Plexiglass shattered. The 109 pulled up hard, smoking, trailing a stream of coolant or oil or both. The first fighter pressed through. His cannons fired at 400 yards. Shells tore through Hedgehog's tail section, not the stabilizer this time, but the fuselage itself. Cac kept firing. His tracers walked across the 109's wing route. The German pilot broke left at 200 yards, so close Hartwell could see the crosses on his fuselage. "Hits on the fighter," Cox said. "He's smoking. He's there. He's turning east." The second 109 had already retreated. Both German pilots had decided that 2 stragglers weren't worth dying for. But they hadn't left. They were still out there, circling at 1,200 yards, waiting for the fuel gauges to hit zero. At 5031, Hartwell saw them. 4 aircraft, northeast, high altitude, contrail streaming. Not German. The silhouette was wrong, the wing shape wrong, the speed wrong. Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, American long-range escort fighters returning from a sweep over Belgium. Hayes saw them too. His voice cracked over the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, this is YB-40 5041, position 50 nautical miles south of Hastings, under fighter attack, requesting immediate assistance." The Thunderbolts dove. Hartwell watched them drop through 20,000 feet, then 18, then 16. Their dive speed was immense, almost violent, the airframe wrenching acceleration of 4,000 pounds of fighter falling out of the sky. The Messerschmitt saw them coming. They didn't wait to engage. They turned east, toward France, toward home. The P-47s didn't pursue. Their flight leader waggled his wings and formed up on Hedgehog's left, 200 yards out. Escort to the English coast. Morrison checked the fuel. 37 minutes. Landfall in 22. They were going to make it. Hartwell's hands were still shaking on the yoke. 5053 p.m. English coast. Dungeness below the left wing. The P-47s peeled away one by one, waggling wings in farewell, climbing toward their own airfields inland. Hartwell watched them go and felt something release in his chest. Not relief, not yet. Just the acknowledgement that they weren't alone anymore. Hayes's voice crackled through the radio, strained. "Hedgehog, this is 5741. Number 2, engine seized. Oil pressure 0. I'm feathering it now." Hartwell looked right. Hayes's YB-40 had dropped 50 feet, then 100. 3 engines. One propeller feathered, blades turned edge onto the wind, creating nothing but drag. His airspeed was bleeding. 130, 125, 120. "Hayes, what's your fuel state?" 23 minutes at current burn, maybe less. I'm not making Alconbury." "Manston," Hartwell said. "Emergency field on the Kent Peninsula. You can see it from here. Call them now." Hayes's voice came back. "Manston Tower, this is YB-40 541, 3 engines, fuel critical, declaring emergency. Request straight-in approach." The response was immediate. 541, Manston Tower, you are cleared direct. Runway 28, emergency vehicles standing by. Altitude, 12,000, descending. Maintain descent. Report field in sight. Hartwell watched Hayes's YB-40 angle toward the southeast, toward the emergency field on the tip of Kent. His bomber was already 1,500 feet below Hedgehog, still descending, still losing speed. 3 engines against 68,000 pounds. The math was brutal. "Hedgehog," Hayes said. "See you on the ground." "See you on the ground," Hartwell answered. Hayes's YB-40 disappeared into the haze over Kent. Alconbury was still 23 minutes east-northeast. Hedgehog had 29 minutes of fuel. The margin had expanded barely. Morrison climbed down from the top turret. "I need to start the manual gear extension now." "It takes time." Hartwell nodded. "Do it. Do it." Morrison moved aft, toward the bulkhead where the emergency crank was stored. Hartwell heard the metal handle engage, heard Morrison's steady rhythm as he turned. 100 revolutions to unlock the gear, another 100 to lower it all by hand. All while the bomber descended through 10,000 feet with damaged controls and a jammed trim tab and a horizontal stabilizer held together by luck. 7 minutes passed. Morrison's breathing was audible over the intercom, not labored but concentrated. Turning, counting, turning, turning. "Left main down and locked," he reported. "Tail wheel down and locked. 4 more minutes." The English countryside was visible now. Green fields, roads, villages, normal life happening below them. People who didn't know about YB-40s or stragglers or the weight of 68,000 pounds that wouldn't drop. "Right main," Morrison said. 15 seconds from lock." The gear engaged. The indicator showed green. Hedgehog was ready to land. Alconbury appeared through broken clouds at 6011. Hartwell called the tower, declared minor damage and manual gear extension, requested straight-in approach. Cleared to land. Runway 23, wind calm. The yoke fought him all the way down. The jammed trim tab wanted Hedgehog to float, to stay airborne, to refuse the ground. Hartwell pushed forward with both hands, holding the nose down, bleeding airspeed at exactly the rate he needed. 100 knots, 90, 85. Runway threshold passed beneath the nose. Hedgehog touched down at 6:18 p.m. Right main gear locked with 15 seconds of fuel remaining in the main tanks. The tires smoked. The airframe groaned. Hartwell held the yoke back, kept the tail down, let the drag of 68,000 pounds do what speed could not. The bomber rolled to a stop on the taxiway. Morrison's voice was quiet. Engine secured. Hartwell killed the magnetos. The propellers spun down, slowed, stopped. Silence filled the cockpit. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of engines that had nothing left to give. Colonel Reed was waiting on the hard stand, 6032 p.m. RAF Allenbury. Hard stand 7. Hartwell's flight suit was soaked through. Not from hydraulic fluid, not from rain, but from sweat. 31 degrees Fahrenheit at altitude. He was sweating anyway. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He sat in the pilot's seat for a full 30 seconds after the propeller stopped turning, feeling the silence press against his eardrums. Then he climbed down. His legs nearly buckled on the ladder. Morrison caught his elbow, steadied him, released. Neither man spoke. The ground crew was already swarming, Hedgehog counting holes, measuring damage, photographing the shredded horizontal stabilizer for the engineers at Wright Field, who needed to understand what happened when you added 4,000 pounds to an airframe that wasn't designed to carry it. 16 bullet holes in the fuselage, 1 severed hydraulic line, 1 jammed trim tab, 1 horizontal stabilizer with structural damage that would require a full replacement. The crew chief walked around the right wing, stopped at the cannon strike, ran his gloved fingers along the torn aluminum. "Captain," he said, "you flew this across the channel?" Hartwell nodded. The crew chief said nothing else. He didn't need to. Colonel Reed was waiting at the edge of the hard stand, 47 years old, silver hair, command pilot's wings. He'd flown B-17s in 1942, back when the 8th Air Force was learning how to die over France. He understood weight and speed and the mathematics of survival. He understood what a bomber should be. He looked at Hedgehog, looked at the damage, looked at Hartwell. "Assessment," Reed said. Hartwell's voice came out flat. "It works, sir. The guns work. The chin turret killed a Focke-Wulf. The waist gunners hit another. The tail gunner damaged a 109. We engaged 6 separate attacks and took no casualties." Reed waited. Hartwell looked at Hedgehog. The flying destroyer. 16 guns. 11,000 rounds. 4,000 pounds of additional weight that couldn't be dropped, couldn't be jettisoned, couldn't be anything except dead mass dragging them down. "But it can't keep up," he said. "Sir. After the formation drops bombs, they climb faster and fly higher." We're still carrying everything we took off with. The weight doesn't change. The drag doesn't change. We fall behind. How far? 8 miles on the return leg. Maybe more if we have to maneuver. Hartwell paused. We were alone over France for 43 minutes. The fighters figured us out in the first 6. They knew we couldn't run. Reed's expression didn't change. What do you recommend? Hartwell had 42 combat missions. He was 26 years old. He had never told a full colonel what to do with a multi-million-dollar weapon system, but he'd flown Hedgehog across the channel with jammed controls and cannon damage and fuel gauges reading empty. He'd watched Hayes's YB-40 limp toward Manston on 3 engines. He'd counted the German fighters circling at 800 yards, waiting for him to run out of sky. The chin turret, Hartwell said. That works. That kills fighters at 12 o'clock. But the weight, sir, we can't carry the weight. The concept is broken. Reed looked at Hedgehog, looked at the damage, looked at the fuel bowser pumping the last dregs from the tanks. 15 minutes of fuel, maybe less. 68,000 pounds of aluminum and armor and machine guns that had burned through 6 hours of fuel in 4. Write your report, Reed said. I want it on my desk by 0900 tomorrow. He turned and walked toward the operations building. Hartwell stood alone on the hardstand, watching the ground crew count holes. Morrison appeared beside him with a canteen cup of coffee. Real coffee, not the powdered substitute. Hartwell took it. His hands were still shaking. Sir, Morrison said, was it worth it? Hartwell didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the chin turret, about Bradley's tracers walking across the FW-190's nose, about the German pilot's canopy shattering at 600 yards. I don't know, he said. Ask me after the war. Reed ordered 7 more missions. Maybe the first test was an anomaly. Maybe different tactics would work. Maybe positioning the YB-40s differently in the formation. Not in the trail element, but in the low squadron, or the high squadron, or somewhere the weight wouldn't drag them so far behind, would solve the speed problem. June 15th. Lorient. 4 YB-40s dispatched. All 4 fell behind after the bomb drop. Average separation distance, 6 miles. Average time alone over enemy territory, 31 minutes. German fighters attacked 3 of the 4. No YB-40s lost. No German fighters confirmed, destroyed. June 22nd. Hulls, the IG Farben synthetic rubber plant. 11 YB-40s dispatched, the largest concentration of flying destroyers ever assembled. The mission brief promised a test of the concept at scale. What happened instead? 1 YB-40 lost a flak and fighters. 10 survivors straggling home individually, scattered across the channel, landing at emergency fields from Manston to Martlesham Heath. The last YB-40 touched down 3 hours after the main formation. June 28th. St. Nazaire again. 6 YB-40s. They claimed 1 German fighter destroyed. All 6 fell behind on the return leg. One crew reported they'd been alone over France for 43 minutes, the same duration as Hedgehog's first mission. Alone meant vulnerable. The aircraft designed to protect bombers needed protection itself. Engineers at Abbott's Ripton Depot tried modifications, adjusted the waste gun feeds to reduce jams, changed ammunition loading procedures to distribute weight more evenly, moved everything that could be moved forward to fix the center of gravity problem. Nothing worked. The fundamental problem remained mathematical, immutable, impossible to engineer away. A B-17F carrying bombs weighed 65,000 pounds at takeoff. After dropping bombs, it weighed 48,000. The YB-40 weighed 68,000 at takeoff. After combat, it still weighed 64,000. 4,000 pounds of guns and ammunition that couldn't be dropped. 4,000 pounds of weight that became more punitive with every hour of flight, every mile of distance, every gallon of fuel burned to keep the formation in sight. The 8th Air Force compiled statistics. 48 YB-40 sorties flown, 5 confirmed German fighter kills, 2 probables, 1 YB-40 lost. Every single aircraft had fallen behind its formation after the bomb drop. Average separation distance, 7 miles. Average time alone over enemy territory, 38 minutes. Luftwaffe Fighter Chief Adolf Galland reviewed captured intelligence reports. His assessment was translated, circulated, filed. German pilots had figured out the YB-40s quickly. The heavily armed bombers looked different. Extra turrets visible from any angle, no bomb bay doors, distinctive silhouette. They flew in the most vulnerable positions. After the formation dropped bombs, the YB-40s became stragglers. German fighters focused attacks on stragglers. Gallen's conclusion: the YB-40 kills were insignificant, not worth the cost. His pilots would rather attack the flying destroyers than avoid them. Easy targets that couldn't run. On July 29th, the last two YB-40s flew their final combat mission. Target: U-boat yards at Kiel. Both aircraft fell behind. Both required fighter escort to reach England. Both landed at emergency fields short of their home base. In August, General Carl Spaatz canceled the program. 12 surviving YB-40s returned to the United States in November. Most became gunnery trainers. Their 16 guns stripped down, reconfigured, used to teach aerial gunners how to track targets that didn't shoot back. 4 were stripped and converted back to standard bombers. The rest were scrapped. The concept died after 3 months of combat testing. The Army Air Forces had spent $469,000 per aircraft on the conversions, 12 aircraft, $5.6 million for a weapon system that made bombers more vulnerable instead of safer. History would call it a failure. But history wasn't finished with the YB-40 yet. September 1943, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. The Engineering Department of the Army Air Forces. The combat reports from England arrived in crates, hundreds of pages of debriefs, gun camera footage, damage assessments, crew testimonials. Engineers spread them across long wooden tables, reading by the gray light of Ohio autumn. They were looking for patterns, looking for lessons, looking for something salvageable from 3 months of expensive failure. The YB-40 program had cost $5.6 million, 48 sorties, 5 confirmed kills, a weapon system that couldn't keep up with the formation it was designed to protect. But the chin turret, every combat report mentioned the chin turret. Every crew who'd flown the YB-40 described the same sequence. German fighter approaching from 12 o'clock high, confident in the blind spot, closing to 600 yards. Chin turret opening fire. German fighter breaking off, smoking, diving away, sometimes crashing. Frontal attack defeated. The engineers looked at the gun camera footage. 250 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, remote controlled from the bombardier station, electrically powered traverse and elevation, 300 rounds per gun, converged at 400 yards. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't revolutionary. It was just a turret mounted, where a turret had never been mounted before. Under the nose, not above it, not behind it. A field of fire that covered 12 o'clock level to 12 o'clock high, the exact vector German pilots had exploited since 1942. The engineers asked a simple question: could we put this on a production bomber? Boeing said yes. The Bendix Chin turret, designated Model A, entered production in September 1943. Douglas Aircraft installed the first production units on the last 86 B-17F aircraft, coming off the Long Beach assembly line. These bombers deployed to England in October. Crews walked around them, pointed at the nose, asked what it was called. Chin turret. Answer to 12 o'clock high. The 91st Bomb Group flew the first combat mission with chin turret-equipped B-17Fs on October 14, 1943. Target: Schweinfurt. The mission that would become infamous as Black Thursday, when the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers and 600 crewmen in a single day. But the 91st chin turret aircraft survived 12 frontal attacks. 10 broke off early. 2 pressed through and took hits. 1 Focke-Wulf confirmed destroyed. 0 bombers lost to frontal attacks in that group. The math was irrefutable. Boeing incorporated the chin turret into the B-17G production model. First aircraft rolled off the Seattle line in December 1943. The G model became the definitive flying fortress, the version that would carry the bombing campaign through D-Day, through the Bulge, through the final collapse of the Third Reich. Boeing plants in Seattle and Wichita, Douglas in Long Beach and Tulsa, Vega in Burbank. 3 manufacturers, 5 assembly lines, all building B-7Gs with the standardized chin turret. Production ramped fast, 50 aircraft per month in January 1944, 120 per month by March, 230 per month by June. Total B-70G production, 8,680 aircraft. Every single one carried the chin turret that started on the failed YB-40 program. The 303rd Bomb Group transitioned to B-17Gs in February 1944. Their loss rate from frontal attacks dropped from 12% to 3%. The 379th Bomb Group reported similar numbers. 11% to 4%. The 384th tracked their data carefully. Before Chin turrets, 43 bombers lost to frontal attacks in 6 months. After Chin turrets, 14 lost in 12 months. 8th Air Force statisticians calculated the overall impact. The Chin turret reduced bomber losses to frontal attacks by 71%. 71%. By VE Day, the B-17 equipped 26 heavy bombardment groups in Europe, 4 groups in Italy, 2 in the Pacific. 32 groups total. Each group flew 48 aircraft on standard missions. That's 1,536 B-17s in combat simultaneously. Each of those aircraft carried the Chin turret. Each of those turrets had been developed, tested, proven, and salvaged from a program that officially failed. But the Chin turret wasn't the only YB-40 innovation that survived. Engineers studying the combat reports noticed something else. The waist gun positions on standard B-17Fs were directly opposite each other. Port and starboard gunners standing face to face, fighting for space, bumping into each other during attacks from beam angles. Combat footage showed gunners physically blocking each other while tracking fast-moving targets. Their fields of fire overlapped, but not in a useful way. They got in each other's way. The YB-40 had moved the right waist gun position forward by 30 inches. Staggered configuration. Each gunner had room to move, room to swing their guns through full traverse, room to reload without elbowing their crewmate in the spine. Boeing incorporated staggered waist positions into the B-17. Waist gunners reported 40% better field of fire, fewer jams from rushed reloading, better coordination during simultaneous attacks from both sides. The 94th Bomb Group documented their experience. Before staggered positions, average engagement time was 12 seconds before gunners interfered with each other. After staggered positions, 27 seconds of continuous tracking. More than double. The third improvement came from the tail. Staff Sergeant Raymond Cack had reported limited visibility from the standard tail position during his combat mission over France. Small windows, restricted view. Difficult to track fighters approaching from 6 o'clock low, the vector German pilots adopted when they realized the Chin turret had closed 12 o'clock high. The Army Air Forces contracted with the Cheyenne Modification Center in Wyoming to redesign the tail position. Larger windows. Better visibility above and below. Improved gun mounting. Enhanced armor protection. They called it the Cheyenne tail. It became standard on late production B-17Gs. 3 innovations from a failed program. Chin turret. Staggered waist guns. Cheyenne tail. All 3 incorporated into the B-17G. All 3 saving lives on every mission for the rest of the war. December 1943. RAF Allenbury. Captain James Hartwell walked across the hard stand toward the new arrivals. 22 B-7Gs had touched down that morning, fresh from the Douglas plant in Tulsa, still carrying that new aircraft smell of paint and hydraulic fluid and unburned fuel. Crews gathered around them like pilgrims at a shrine. Hartwell was a training officer now. His combat tour was complete. 25 missions, including that first YB-40 flight, including 16 more in standard B-17Fs, including the Distinguished Flying Cross he never wore and never talked about. He was supposed to be teaching new pilots how to survive. But today, he just wanted to look at the Chin turret. It gleamed under the weak English sunlight. 2.5 caliber barrels, compact housing, simple gun sight in the bombardier station. 300 rounds per gun, belts fed from ammunition boxes mounted directly behind the turret. A young lieutenant was running his fingers along the housing. "Sir," he said, "where did this come from?" Hartwell looked at the turret, looked at the bomber, looked at the young pilot who had no idea what a YB-40 was, no idea about Hedgehog or Saint Nazaire or 43 minutes alone over France with German fighters circling. "A program called YB-40, Hartwell said. Flying destroyer. 16 guns. Couldn't keep up with the formation." The lieutenant waited. Hartwell touched the turret's housing. Cold aluminum. Perfectly machined. Completely functional. "It failed," he said. "The program lasted 3 months. We spent $5.5 million on 12 aircraft. Every single one fell behind on the return leg. We became targets instead of protectors." The lieutenant's expression shifted. Uncertainty, maybe disappointment. "So it was a waste?" Hartwell looked at the bomber stream forming up in the distance. B-70Gs climbing through broken clouds. their chin turrets gleaming, their crews checking guns and fuel and oxygen, thousands of aircraft, tens of thousands of crewmen, all of them protected by a turret that came from 12 failures. No, Hartwell said. It wasn't a waste. He thought about Hedgehog, about the weight that couldn't be dropped, about the German fighters circling at 800 yards, waiting for him to run out of fuel, about Bradley's tracers walking across the FW-190's nose, the canopy shattering, the fighter rolling inverted and diving toward the channel. We learned what worked, he said, and we kept it. May 1945. Victory in Europe. The B-17G had flown 290,000 combat sorties from English bases. Each sortie meant 8 to 10 hours in the air. Each sortie meant flak and fighters and cold and fear. Each sortie meant the chin turret tracking across the nose, searching for the Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts that had once attacked 12 o'clock high with impunity. They didn't attack 12 o'clock high anymore. German fighter pilots learned, the way all pilots learn, through fire and death and the mathematics of survival. A head-on pass against a B-17G meant flying into two streams of .50 caliber tracer converging at 400 yards. Even if you killed the bomber, you died in the same second. So they stopped. The 303rd Bomb Group flew its last combat mission on April 25, 1945. Target, Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. 37 B-7Gs. 0 frontal attacks. 0 losses. The 379th flew its last mission the same day. Target, Salzburg, Austria. 41 B-7Gs. 0 frontal attacks. 0 losses. The 384th had tracked their data carefully. Before chin turrets, 43 bombers lost to frontal attacks in 6 months. After chin turrets, 14 lost in 12 months. After the Cheyenne tail and staggered waist positions, 3 lost in the final 8 months of the war. 3. The YB-40 program had cost $5.6 million and produced 5 confirmed kills. The chin turret, the innovation that survived, had saved an estimated 2,300 bomber crews. 23,000 men. The war ended. The bombers came home. Most of them didn't come home intact. They came home in pieces. Surplus aluminum sold to manufacturers who melted them down into pots and pans and refrigerators. They came home as photographs in footlockers, as combat reports filed in archives, as memories that faded with the men who carried them. The B-17G disappeared from American skies. The jet age arrived. The Strategic Air Command built its fleet around bombers that flew higher and faster. Bombers that didn't need chin turrets because they didn't need guns at all. But some of them survived. The National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton displays a B-7G, tail number 4483514, named Shoo 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 Baby, restored to flying condition, though it doesn't fly anymore. The chin turret gleams under the museum lights, polished aluminum reflecting the faces of visitors who walk beneath its guns. The plaque mentions it was standard equipment on all G models. The plaque doesn't mention the YB-40. It doesn't mention Captain James Hartwell or Hedgehog or the 43 minutes alone over France. It doesn't mention 12 aircraft that cost $5.6 million and failed so completely their program lasted 3 months. It doesn't mention the engineers at Wright Field who read combat reports in the gray Ohio autumn and asked a simple question. Could we put this on a production bomber? History remembers successes. The B-7DG that helped win the war. The flying fortress that became an icon. The bomber that could take tremendous damage and bring crews home. History forgets failures. But failures teach lessons. Successes never do. The last YB-40 mission flew on July 29, 1943. By August, the program was officially canceled. By November, all 12 surviving aircraft had returned to the United States. Most became gunnery trainers. Their 16 guns stripped down, reconfigured, used to teach aerial gunners how to track targets that didn't shoot back. A few were scrapped immediately. One ended up in a scrapyard scene in the 1946 film The Best Years of Our Lives, visible for 3 seconds in the background, unrecognizable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. No YB-40 survived the war intact. No museums preserved them. No restoration projects brought them back. The flying destroyer disappeared from history, erased by the success of the very innovation it had spawned. But the innovation lived. Every B-17G that flew over Europe, every bomber crew that survived a frontal attack, every pilot who made it to 25 missions because a Focke-Wulf broke off early when chin turret tracers found their target, 23,000 crew members came home because of a failed program. 23,000 men who lived, married, had children, built careers, grew old. 23,000 men who would have died in 1943 and 1944 and 1945, their bombers falling out of formation with cannon shells through the cockpit, their names added to the granite walls of memorials. Their families would visit for generations. They came home because 12 aircraft couldn't keep up. They came home because the YB-40 taught the Army Air Forces how to fail forward. December 1943. RAF Allenbury. Captain James Hartwell stood on the hard stand with his hands in his flight jacket pockets, watching the young lieutenant study the chin turret. "Sir," the lieutenant said, "the YB-40, was it worth it? The money, the effort, the crews who flew it?" Hartwell didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about Hedgehog, about the weight that couldn't be dropped, about Morrison counting revolutions on the manual gear extension, about Delaney patching shell holes in the waist, about Koch tracking fighters through a damaged gun sight, firing until his ammunition ran out. He was thinking about the German pilot whose canopy shattered at 600 yards, whose aircraft rolled inverted and dove toward the channel, whose name he would never know and whose death he had never celebrated. He was thinking about 8,680 B-7Gs. Every mission, he said, every dollar, every bullet hole in Hedgehog's fuselage. The lieutenant nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand. Not yet. He hadn't flown the YB-40. He hadn't watched the formation pull away while German fighters circled at 800 yards. He hadn't landed with 15 minutes of fuel and a jam-trimmed tab and 16 bullet holes in the fuselage. But he would. Not today, not tomorrow. But someday, when he was old and the war was a memory carried in his bones, he would understand that success and failure are not opposites. They are partners. They are parents. They are the beginning and the end of every innovation that ever saved a life. The chin turret gleamed in the weak English sunlight. Hartwell turned away from it. He had a training class to teach.